Hey, Elisa, how you guys doing? So this is it. This is the end, the last new lesson per se. And so as a way to kind of end, I thought it'd be appropriate to kind of talk a little bit about 9/11, since the world you live in is that post 9/11 world. Um, and so, yeah, so that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. I also have included a little bit of video, it's a kind of an uplifting kind of video talking about people pulling together right after those tragic events. Um, it's a documentary that, it's only about like 10, 11 minutes. So I've included that for you as well. So maybe something to kind of feel a little good about people. Maybe we need a little bit more of that in our world right now. So you have that. Um, yeah. So other than that, the only other thing I was trying to figure out is why the bowling pins around here weren't working. But then I realized they went on strike. There you go. Joke of the day. Anywho, yeah. So I hope all is well. Stay safe, stay smart, and talk to you guys later. So September 11th, 2001, less than a year into George W. Bush's presidency, is one of those days that marks American history. We've kind of been talking about this year. People know and remember where they were when they learned of the attack at Pearl Harbor. People know and remember where they were when they heard about the death of John F. Kennedy. Um, people, people, especially my age who were younger at the time, know and remember where they were when they learned that the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded. And then there's September 11th. And the gentleman you see on your screen here is Osama bin Laden. And Osama bin Laden was leader of a terrorist organization known as Al Qaeda. And Al Qaeda saw themselves in a never ending struggle against the secular West. Uh, and with the United States being the leader of the West, we became the target of much of their attacks. They had launched attacks against the United States before. In 1998, they had simultaneously bombed both the U.S. Embassy in Kenya and the U.S. Embassy in Tanzania. And in 2000, they'd attacked an American warship called the Cole, which was docked in Yemen. But the September 11th attack is an attack against the United States on a massive scale. So there were 19 men who infiltrated the country. They lived inside the country for quite some time, trained inside the United States, and they used aircraft to attack our country. And so you can see here from this map that we're looking at 4 planes. 2 planes leaving from Boston. Those 2 planes were on a path to attack the World Trade Center, the Twin Towers. 1 plane leaving from Newark Airport. That plane, we believe, that plane's purpose, that plane's target was the White House. And then there was a plane that left from Dulles Airport, which is in Virginia, just outside Washington, D.C. And the thought was that that plane was going to attack the Pentagon. And so all of those planes, except the one that left from Newark Airport, did attack their targets. The plane that attacked from Newark Airport, passengers on board that plane had learned of the attacks on the other targets. They knew that something was awry. They knew their plane was basically had been hijacked. And through cell phone calls from loved ones, they knew what was going on, and they decided to take back their plane. And so they stormed the cockpit and wrestled with the hijackers and managed to crash the plane into a deserted field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania. So you see that there. In terms of the attack in New York, it's the World Trade Center. This image actually shows you just how widespread the damage was in Lower Manhattan. With the buildings you see there in black or grayed out darkly, those buildings were completely destroyed, with major damage done to everything you see in orange. And those that are striped, those buildings actually partially collapsing themselves. In total, just under 3,000 Americans were killed in these attacks, and many of them came from our own town, our own village. So the response to this was known as the Bush Doctrine, and it completely kind of changed our foreign policy, in which George W. Bush famously says that you are either with us or you are with the terrorists. And it begins this idea of preventative intervention, the idea that the United States now will not sit around and wait for trouble to kind of pop up somewhere and then go and deal with it. The United States will preemptively go and make sure that trouble doesn't even pop up. And so, as a result of this, the United States found themselves engaged in a war in Iraq, in which the suspicion was that the leader of Iraq, a man by the name of Saddam Hussein, um, was accumulating weapons of mass destruction to either give to other terrorists or to attack U.S. positions. And so the United States waged a war against Iraq to make sure that didn't happen. Subsequently, we have found out that he did not have those weapons. So there was a little bit of a failure of intelligence that way. But it also saw the United States go into Afghanistan, try to clean up the government in Afghanistan. Once the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan failed in the 1980s, you had a very weakened government in Afghanistan, which allowed a group called the Taliban to kind of take over. And the Taliban was, again, a very fundamentalist organization. They were against the West, against Western freedoms for their people. And of course, in the weird kind of way, is that they were fighting against the Soviets. So we were helping them fight against the Soviets. They win, they take over, and what they do is they open up their doors to a group like Al Qaeda to come in and train and work within their country. So we saw a massive U.S. operation in Afghanistan, in which we still have troops in Afghanistan today. We also have some troops still in Iraq today, that kind of like stemming from all of this. And the Bush Doctrine has kind of changed our foreign policy to the point where we now see ourselves intervening preventatively across the world. And it's something there's been pushback from that. We now have the Trump Doctrine, right, which going back to an isolationist position, right? And this is why that is controversial, because of the memory of 9/11. The thought was that something like the Bush Doctrine would prevent another 9/11 against the country. And we have not had. We've thwarted attacks against our country, but we've not had another massive attack on our soil since then. But of course, right now with President Trump, he's trying to take our foreign policy in a different direction. And this is where that controversy, this is where that discussion, I should say, comes in. But you now live in a post 9/11 world. Your world is defined by 9/11. Our laws that we have are based on this event of 9/11. Our travel restrictions are based on this. You live in that world. You live in this world where there is this fear of global terror, and you weren't born before it. So this is kind of what you know, but it completely changed everything about the United States in terms of even how we go shopping at the mall was changed because of this attack, where people had to look and reevaluate safety procedures everywhere. Yeah. And so with that, that is kind of where I think it's a good place to kind of stop our discussion here of US II, bringing you up to basically the framework of the world in which we live in today, for good or for bad. It's where we're at. And now it's up to you guys to go out there and make it a little bit better for the old people like me.